Well, hello everyone. I am looking forward to this conversation. So it's just me flying solo today. Michelle's off doing something else, but the reason why I am flying solo is because the guest that I have is I know personally, and I'm really excited to introduce you to him. And the person that we've got on our interview today is David Roland, and he is a psychologist, a writer, presenter, as well as a certified forest bathing guide. So, yes, there is such a thing. And he's a graduate of Sydney Uni with honours, gained his PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Wollongong, with his research focus on performance anxiety in musicians. So that's really interesting, David. I remember us having a little bit of a conversation about that. And David has worked for more than 20 years as a clinical and forensic psychologist before taking up writing, presenting, and nature connection. Has also got a short course, Move Forward with Trauma, and which is also featured online course with Simon Sinek's The Optimism Library. Now, as I mentioned, that David is an author. He's an author of 3 books: The Power of Suffering, his memoir, How I Rescued My Brain, which I would totally recommend, as well as The Confident Performer. And like I said, I am so looking forward to sharing David's experience with you because I have had a personal experience with David. So I just want to bring you on. Hi, David.
Hi, Jan. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm just so stoked that you're able to come on. David and I all know each other because we're both ocean swimmers in Byron, and I have taken some of his forest bathing experience with friends of mine, and it has just been incredibly transforming, and also, quite memorable. And when I thought, I had an opportunity to actually share this with the people that, I work with, who work with us and who are listening to our podcast, I was just really excited, because my experience with it, David, is that some of the activities that you do really invite us to, I don't know, go in to areas that perhaps we don't on a normal day to day, or even when we do reflective processes, they are quite different. And I remember one actual activity that we had done, and I think we were meditating, and I think it was just a short silent meditation, and we were lying down in the sun. And after that, I physically felt quite different. And it was just really interesting to experience, and it not only just lasted that afternoon, it has stayed with me. So there's been some quite significant shifts, and yeah, that's my experience from it, and I'm sure you've got others. So David, can you tell us a little bit about what forest bathing is and also what led you to it?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. And thanks for sharing that experience. I think I remember when that might have happened. As you said afterwards, something significant had occurred.
Mm.
Yeah, well, actually, during the pandemic, like many people, I was trapped at home, but because I don't live in a city, I was able to get out and about. And some friends were starting a new walking club just to explore our local area in ways that hadn't been done before. And I just intuitively, I had like a thirst, it's a hunger to get out into the forest. So I did that. But after a while, I got a bit annoyed with people chatting all the time because I was in this beautiful nature. And of course, they're chatting about everything else other than where they are. So not being fully present. And I've got a meditation background, which you'll know about since reading my memoir. I used mindfulness and meditation as one way of changing the way my brain was working. So I started leading walks, and I said, let's do it. Let's do periods of walking in silence. And for my last book, The Power of Suffering, I'd come across the concept of Shinrin Yoku, which is a Japanese practice, which literally translates as forest bathing. And it doesn't mean literally bathing in the water in the forest. It means bathing in the atmosphere of the forest. And that's quite important because there's a lot of things going on in the atmosphere of the forest, and also what we call blue spaces like oceans and lakes and so on. And so that's when I started training formally with FT Hub, who are now about to become the biggest trainer of forest bathing guides in the world. They're part of a huge research project coming out of Europe, where they'll train over 600 people to dispense this kind of work throughout the world.
And because you went to Japan recently, was that right?
I finished the training in Hong Kong.
Oh, Hong Kong, right.
Yeah, which sounds a bit odd to go to Hong Kong to do forest bathing, but it was the closest and the right time of the year for me to go. And we actually spent the whole time on an island. There's actually really heavily forested islands that are part of Hong Kong.
Right. So maybe Japan comes from where it originated. Is that correct?
That's right. It originated in Japan in the 1980s. And the Japanese have a long history of preserving forests for pilgrims and, and believing in spirits that exist in natural objects. So in some ways that makes sense, but it was actually a government department that said we need to do something because our workers are distressed. And we all know how hard Japanese employees work. And so they were actually looking for antidotes to just general life stress and work stress. And now in Japan, they have designated Shinrin-yoku trails, and they're like a 1 to 2 kilometers long. And there might be a health center at the beginning where you can get a health checkup. And, doctors will do what we call green prescriptions, where they say you need to go and do some Shinrin-yoku. And then they've got designated trails where they can go and do that either on their own or as part of a guided exercise.
Right. No wonder the population, like we've got some of the oldest aging population in Japan because they really know how to take care of their health. So what do you think, from the research and also your experience, are the benefits of forest bathing?
I think there's 4 areas of obvious benefits. One is the reduction in stress. We all know what stress feels like, and we all know what it feels like when we don't have it or we alleviate it. And so that's the first and most obvious one. The second one is rejuvenation or restoration. And being in nature in the way we do with forest bathing or connection with nature, it restores our mental fatigue, or what's also called attention restoration. And so that when you've been working or concentrating on something or traveling or doing a lot of novel things, your concentration level goes down, your quality of attention goes down, and nature practices actually restore that attention. And it seems to be that either viewing natural scenes or hearing natural sounds or, experiencing some of that forest atmosphere is easy to do. We don't have to concentrate on doing that. And it just seems inherently restoring for us. The third area is that it's been shown to improve mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. And I guess the fourth thing is the physical benefits. One of the physical benefits is it reduces blood pressure, but also very interestingly, there's in various natural environments, there are organic volatile compounds, which are compounds that are just given off by the trees and other plants. They're just naturally there. And that seems to have an immune boosting system for humans. And when we think about, well, we've evolved with trees and we've mostly lived for most of our history in treed environments, it's not surprising that we've got a symbiotic relationship with trees and other plants and that their actions can be helpful. So there's at least 4 areas that we can identify confidently that the type of nature connection we do with forest bathing is beneficial.
And just from my experience, like when we talk about what it was like for us, like every experience that I've had with you, David, everyone has had such a positive and affirming experience from when they started to when they actually finished. So, we actually physically can experience those benefits. And not only those, physiological benefits, but there's also insights that happen for people as well. So have you had experience of that when you've done it or when you've facilitated groups at all?
Yeah, definitely. And we've got to remember that forest bathing, when it's usually done as a group, like a guided group, it's got a strong social aspect. And so that social aspect is around being safe with other people, safe in the physical environment. And then, as you said, sharing your experiences. So we call that incorporation or integration. So we don't prescribe what experience you're going to have in nature, but you'll have some kind of experience. And then, as you'll know, I offer the invitation to share something about that experience in any way you like. Like, it can be verbally, it can be through gesture or body movement, or it can also be silence. There's sometimes when silence is the right way to share. And people come up with insights. So just as an example, we often think that life should progress in a really straight and ordered kind of way. And when you go into the forest, and we might do an activity with trees, and I might suggest people, take your head out of it, just feel your body gravitating towards a tree anywhere in this vicinity, and then get to know that tree. And I might provide some suggestions about that. And it's interesting, people don't always go for the most straight, biggest tree. They'll often go for a crooked tree, or a small tree, or a sapling, or a tree that's had obviously some hard times, and they'll identify with that. And then they might say in the sharing, well, I just felt drawn to this tree because here it was growing straight, and then it had to go left, and then obviously a branch had been taken off, but it still made it to the top. And that's an inspiration for people to realize that actually, just like human beings, we don't have this straight trajectory in life. Life dishes out unexpected curveballs, just as it happens in nature. So we're no different, and they're no different.
And, like when we talk about when we've had conversations in the past, David, like I always go back to, can you imagine, like a senior leadership group or, HR business partners to suggest this for teams who have gone under a significant change or restructure or a certain amount of stress, to actually get that attention restoration, because some people, especially senior leaders, have, decision fatigue, and to be able to reset that physiology, your mental, emotional, is so impactful. But also to hear from other team members their experience of the same activity. And when we often do team building activities, that's the interesting part, that, oh, you saw that in that scenario or that activity. And that is where you can really peel back that level of connection, as you mentioned, but also develop your own level of awareness around yourself and what you're drawn to and what senses, light you up.
And we know that when we share those kinds of insights or experiences that we're having with others, we either find, oh, it's really common to other people too, I thought I was the only one, or we find, oh, they've got a different perspective on it. Oh, that's quite helpful. I wasn't looking at it like that. And I think, a useful concept that psychologists use is the 3 systems of emotion. And the 3 systems of emotion, the obvious one is the fight-flight response, which is the threat-based emotions like fear, anxiety. And that's when we're feeling threatened in some way. And in our modern society, that's more likely to be social threats or psychological threats rather than physical threats. The other one is the drive-based emotions. And that's the sort of stuff that gets us up going in the morning, achieving things, pursuing goals. And that's mediated by the dopamine system in the brain. So that's why we get such a sense of a reward or achievement. One of the difficulties, costs of the dopamine system, if we keep activating that, is that it wears us out. Our body needs to rest and recover, just as it does our mind. So the 3rd system is that rest and recover, affiliative, quietening down, not trying to achieve anything system. And when we're doing nature connection, not adventure nature connection, where we're hiking, 30 kilometers a day or climbing mountains, not that kind, but just gentle nature connection, it really activates that calming, that restorative, that social connecting system, those emotions. And in an evolutionary sense, that system came later than the other two. The threat-based obviously has to be important because we've got to survive. And then the drive system's critical because we've got to find food, we've got to find shelter, we've got to find a sexual mate, those sorts of things. But the third system is important because we need to have a break from the other two. And so that's where nature connection, whether you do it personally or whether you're doing as part of a team building exercise, is really valuable.
Oh, well, I even use, some of the activities that you have shared with me. I do that by myself now. So it's something that I can continue to do and to be mindful of. And, I just think that as a team, it is just such a wonderful opportunity to deepen the level of self-awareness, but also the understanding of others, reset. There are just so many benefits to it. As I really encourage people to have a look at it. So what are you working on now, David? Is there anything that you want to share with us? Because I know you're always up to something.
Well, I think there's probably another book in the offering, but I'm, in the research stage. But something I'm particularly excited about is that, in our area, as you know, we've had a lot of natural disasters. We've had floods, we've had wildfires, and we've had multiple ones of those, and still people are physically displaced, but there's a lot of psychological trauma still surrounding natural disasters. And we've got to look at ways of helping people move through that experience that's cost effective. There's only so many trained mental health professionals. So one of the ways we're looking at doing that is through forest bathing, nature connection. And that's the type of nature connection where we do, activities that connect our different senses to the environment we're in. So I'm part of a research project, which we think is a world first, where we'll be taking people that have, been diagnosed as traumatized from recent natural disasters and combining a nature connection process, group process, with some compassion-focused skills, because that's been helpful to help people accept and feel at ease with the flow of life. And so we'll be starting working on that in the second half of this year.
Oh, how exciting and so meaningful. It's such a meaningful project. So where could people find you, David? So if someone has, we've piqued their interest about their team or they're a HR business person, they just want to find a little bit more, where's the best place, do you think?
I think if they go to my website, which is just my name.com.au, or find me on LinkedIn, either those two ways would be good to communicate with me directly.
Okay. And your surname, do you want to just spell that for people?
Yeah, so it's David and Roland without a W. Roland.
Great. Okay.
And so anyone who wants to Google that name will quickly find me.
Yeah. So is there anything else? So people who are listening, they might start to, just consider perhaps running an activity like that. But in the meantime, is there something that you might want to leave them with that they might be able to do themselves, on the weekend or, when they're listening to this?
So I think there's some practical and immediately accessible things that people can do, both as individuals and as groups or teams. And the first thing is to introduce nature into your home and work life. So in any way you can bring nature into that, it can be pot plants, it can be pictures, it can be recorded sounds of nature. It can also be the essential oils of plants, like some of the tree oils have been found to be really beneficial, as I said, for the boosting the immune system. And the second thing I would suggest people do as an individual is find a sit spot. And a sit spot is anywhere that's accessible to you, so there's not too many barriers to getting there, where you just sit. And you might want to do journals or write, but actually just sit and start to observe nature around you. So I've got a sit spot that's on the front porch where I live, and the galahs come every afternoon, and hang off the telephone wires. There's a lot of birds, having their last chat before they go to bed. But there's also a spot further down the road where I walk the dog. And without the dog, that's a really nice place to sit because there's a tree. And the idea is to try and do that as regularly as you can, so you can observe the changes in weather, changes of season, and the way animals and plants adapt to those things. And I think the second thing to do is to start to notice nature more with your senses. And I would encourage people to actually go on some guided forest bathing walks, or, if there's an Indigenous practitioner who's offering that, because it's there once, as you've experienced, that nature's there, but we're not observing it. And observing it, I mean, with not just eyes, but with our nose and with our ears and with our body, tactile. And once you start to observe in that way, you didn't realize how much nature was around you.
And also what you can experience, because your sensory perception has expanded, and so everything else goes along with that. And I'm just thinking of people who are working in corporate environments and things like that. Like usually they do have a view of the outside. Even just sitting down, like you suggested, for a couple of minutes and looking out, looking up, looking at a tree, looking at some nature, even though it might sound simple, it is amazing what it does to your physiology.
Yeah, and that's what we call take a nature break.
Oh,
and so that could be, just stepping outside the door where you've got a view of nature, or you can feel the breeze on your face, or you can smell something. And that can just be a few minutes. I'm not a smoker, but I understand now why smokers want to go outside and smoke. I think part of the reason is they just want to get outside and, experience that breath of fresh air from the nature. So taking little short nature breaks.
I love that, because that was an issue when the smoking, like policies came through, several years ago, is that people were complaining, well, all the smokers, they go out and they have a break. How about us? We're stuck inside. However, there is something about naming it like a nature break, like something to reset the nervous system to enable you to be a better performer. And I think more and more organizations, the more research perhaps, because, left brain logical, will support this, as opposed to just seeing it as just one way of getting out of work. It's actually one way of enhancing the work that you do.
Yeah. So if you go back to that idea of attention restoration, that's what a nature break will do. It will give you a break from this concentrated activity that you're doing, possibly, the sensory overload that you're getting, and then give you a brief respite from that. But then, as we know, nature seems to have this restorative effect. So you'll come back a better performer after the nature break.
Yeah. Okay. So we really encourage everyone. And this is the thing, isn't it, David? Like, sometimes we know these things, but it's the doing of it. And that's where discipline comes in. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. You may not do it every day, but if it's like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or just start to take some action in that direction, you will absolutely notice the difference. Yeah.
And a nature break when you're going home could be walking the dog, or having some reason, if you need a reason other than the idea of you just going outside and staring into space, it can be walking the dog, or taking your garbage bins out, or needing to speak to the neighbor about something.
That's right. Yeah, there's always something underlying, isn't it? Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you, David. That's been a wonderful conversation. And even though I know a lot about it anyway, it's just again reinvigorated my, motivation to continue this, long term. I just think it is an incredible health benefit to be able to, use and utilize. And by having a facilitator, it just deepens the experience. So yeah, I really encourage people to check it out. Okay. Well, thank you, David. And I'll see you in the ocean.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan.